Throne of Liberty is so much better now than when it was released in Korea. I'm going to talk about the kinds of things that they've improved and talk about whether or not this game is going to be worth trying for you, considering that there's an open beta in just a couple of days' time. Let's jump in, let's talk about it. So there are a lot of things that have changed since the Korean release. That's not then me saying I think this game is sensational, but I just wanted to take a moment and actually talk about some of the improvements they've made, and we'll start with this. So basically, one of the things that were in the game when the Korean version launched was these co-op dungeons, right? But what they've added since, for example, is that they've added more of them at different tiers. So these dimensional circle ones, these are your leveling dungeons. This is going to be effectively your tier 1 dungeons, then you're going to have tier 2. And actually what's coming out is basically a kind of like Mythic Plus where there's going to be, I think, up to 30 levels. And then I think, don't quote me on the numbers, maybe up till about level 15, you'll actually get like good rewards. And then beyond that, it's simply just vanity. But the thing that they've added, which wasn't in the game at launch, is, well, at first they added this party board because I don't think that was in the game at launch. But more impressive than that and more interesting than that is that they very quickly added a cross-server party matchmaker. And this works pretty much as you would expect. You pick the dungeon that you want to do, you click matchmaking, you pick your role, so you've got your tank, your healer, and your DPS. You request matchmaking, and then you can exit this and it starts showing you how many are going to be signing up. Now, what's interesting there is that this is also a cross-server. Obviously, I'm not going to do this dungeon, so I'm going to disappoint these people. And beyond that, there's a lot of little quality of life improvements that they've made. So, for example, if I look at the skills here, you'll be able to see that there are now these things called quick slot sets. That's not easy for me to say, apparently. And what these are is you can rearrange your skills, and obviously this corresponds to this bar here, but you can rearrange your skills and you can flick between them. So if I wanted, instead of, you know, maybe I have a tanking build, obviously I'm not really a tank here, but maybe I have a tanking build or a DPS build, well, you can switch between the slots, switch between the sets, and, you know, you go from there. In the exact same vein, they've done the same thing, but with your equipment. So let's say you had an equipment set for tanking versus one where it was just DPS. You can flick between these. Obviously, I'm going naked because I'm actually only using one. This is my Korean account. I played a bit when the game came out in Korea, and then I've played a little bit recently to sort of learn the changes. I'm going to go quite hard in the open beta, which we'll talk more about at the end. But if you want to come and play with me, there'll be a link in the description to my Discord. Make sure you join there, and make sure you watch me on Twitch. But yeah, these are obviously just good quality of life improvements that came relatively quickly when you compare it to certain other games. New World. For those of you who played, this isn't really necessarily a massive change, but you can now also reset your stats for free. It doesn't cost you anything, it just resets them for free. And don't be mistaken, they've actually added a lot of dungeons as well. So I showed you this list before, I showed you these co-op dungeons. As far as I know, I don't think all of the tier 1s were in here at launch. I could be wrong, I didn't get to level 50 at launch, so don't quote me on it. These definitely were, I think, but assuredly the tier 2 ones were also not in the game at launch. They've definitely been adding PvE content here now. One thing that they don't yet have is PvE raids. Now they are going to be adding those. I think they said it's either in January or at least Q1 of 2025, but they're going to be adding 12-man raids. The only kind of raid that exists at the minute is the guild raids, which are worth doing, but they're not necessarily the same kind of raiding that you would expect. You know, with multiple bosses, it's just one boss at a time, but they are adding content. And actually in Korea on, I think, August 24th, they're going to be adding a whole new zone, a whole new region, which is going to be north of the region that's currently in the game. And that is also going to increase your level to 55. There's obviously going to be an expansion when it comes to the gearing and all that kind of jazz. But they're adding a lot of content, and that's going to be coming within 1 year of the Korean release. Now that is probably not going to actually be in the game when this hits global on the 17th of September. What they pretty much said is that all of the system improvements will be in the game, but the content won't be necessarily. So right now, we don't actually fully know what will be versus what won't be in the game when it goes live. For example, that new zone almost definitely won't be in the global version because that'll be something that gets added later. But then there's things that we don't know. For example, they're going to be adding this new skill-based system, which is going to allow you to tweak your skills. So maybe you want to make it instant cast, maybe it'll do more damage, whatever, right? There's going to be ways to tweak it. Whether or not that gets into the global version at launch, we're not 100% sure right now. I think people are thinking that it will, but actually I've not seen an official statement there. Now this next bit, I'm not 100% sure I know everything about this topic, so don't necessarily take my word for it, but they have done some big improvements when it comes to the gearing system. they've done a couple of different things. For example, you can dissolve an item into a trait. One thing that you can do is change a trait if it's already on your gear, which is very handy. So for example, it just, right here, you can click convert trait speciality. And if I had these traits and I had these, these things, I had these trait unlock stones and I had this precious potion of conversion, then I could in theory change the traits. Now, on the surface, that might not seem like very much, but in reality, all of these things that they've done here make the gearing a lot easier, and some would argue that it makes it less pay to win. I'm not going to make that argument simply because I don't fully understand it enough, but they've done a lot of stuff when it comes to the trait management, and there's a lot of extra tokens and potions and stuff like that that will help you there, which I think will make the gearing a lot less painful from when it launched to now, which basically means the global launch will be a lot better. Now, one of the main complaints that have been levied against this game is that it is very Zerg heavy when it comes to PvP. And it definitely used to be, but the developers have taken a lot of effort to make it so that is less of the case. Now, it's going to be difficult for me to show you PvP, so we're just going to look at a map, which I appreciate is not that exciting. But they've taken quite a few steps, but two major steps to reduce the Zerg. And one of them is the fact that they now have these Dominion events. So these are events that happen every so often, and there's different types of events. The peaceful events are basically just you versus everybody else, but it's not PvP. You just have to go and do the task, whatever the task is. The guild event is your guild versus the other guilds. Now, I'm not 100% sure if the alliance is current with that guild, so don't quote me on that, I don't actually know. But the other event is this thing called a Dominion event. And these, if I'm honest, I think are going to be my favorite event all in all. Now, what it is, you will go to that event. So let's say this one is over here. And when you get there, you will be allocated a team. There are 3 teams, red, green, and blue, I think. And the numbers, therefore, will be relatively even. It's PvP, so, the other 2 teams are going to try and kill you. And your team will show on the map and stuff like that. And you obviously want to work with your team. But you can't coordinate here, right? Let's say you take 50 people and you all go to that Dominion event. Well, that doesn't help you because you're all going to be on different teams. Nobody's really getting an advantage there. That basically is periodic battlegrounds. Like, you can go in, the team numbers are going to be relatively even, and you'll have a lot of fun, providing you're not massively behind. So my character here is massively behind. So I went, and apart from the fact that I don't know what I'm doing, which is true, my character just gets absolutely blown up by people in tier 2 purples, right? So I can't really compete. That makes sense, I'd have to put in the effort to catch up, and there's no point doing that because the global's coming out. But those events, they are fun. They are basically battlegrounds, and they're varied, right? So all of these events will at some point go to the Dominion event, and it'll be all over the map, and they're in some really cool places. I think that's going to be probably the best content in the game when the game launches in global. There are also open world bosses. The peaceful events, by the way, you just go over there. There's a little portal that puts you in an instance with that boss. There's loads of people gathered around. You nuke the boss down. It's boring, but you get the gear. That's fine. The PvP ones are more interesting for the guilds. Again, I'm not sure if alliances count or they don't count for these. Do apologize for that. But the PvP ones, they are not instanced. You fight with the other guilds. And the reason you want to do the PvP ones if you're a good PvP guild is because some of them have really good item drops, and you want to make it so that your guild gets it, which means one of your members definitely gets it, basically. Whereas if you do the peaceful event, it can go to anybody, right? You have no control in it. You're just 1 out of 100 people or what have you. But yeah, the Dominion events, for my take, probably going to be the best content in the game when the game launches in global. Now, there's another thing that they've done that I want to talk about, which are boon stones and rift stones. Now, what these are, they're basically like controllable areas on the map, right? And if you see these little icons, they'll tell you what the schedule is and what you get from having it. So this is one of the earlier level ones, and you can see when it next becomes capturable. You can also see here the rift stones and the map over my head right here. So let's say I click this one, you can see it's going to be going live in 2 hours and 9 minutes. Now, there's 2 components to this. There's one where I think it's on your server. There's also an inter-server guild battle, which, if I'm honest, I don't really know too much about. But the main change that they've made here is that this is just one guild versus another guild, and nobody else can participate. You can go and watch the fight if you're in a different guild, but you basically have to declare your intent to try and take it. And if you win, then you start getting the resources, and you get like extra stuff. So here you'll get skill damage resistance 50. But the key thing is, alliances don't count. There's no way of bringing extra people in. It's not a Zerg fight. It's literally a straight up even guild versus guild fight. Some of the best guild content I think will actually be that right there. The problem they were having prior to this is that people were cheesing alliances. So people were alliancing beyond the number of alliances that you're allowed, which, to be fair, in some cases, I think they still do that. And it was basically just becoming who has the most amount of people. Well, the developers NCSoft have taken a lot of effort to make it so that's not the case. And I think that'll be well received when it hits global. Now, that issue with the alliances and stuff still is relevant for the Castle Siege. The Castle Siege, if I'm honest, is going to be fun for a lot of people to just go and check out, but there's only going to be a certain amount of hardcore guilds fighting over that, so I'm not going to talk about it. Now, that's not to say that I think the game is perfect. While there has been some big changes, there's also been a couple of like dubious decisions, which normally there's been a dubious decision and then they correct it, but you know, not necessarily always. One of the dubious decisions at the minute is sort of the addition of an arena. So the arena here is a 3v3 arena, and they have normal, which is a match made normal version where it's not ranked. They have ranked as well. Then they have this friendly match where you can literally sort of like organize events and invite who you want, and you know, basically like a duel, but like actually completely fair and stuff like that. Now, the main problem with this, and again, here is sort of like anecdotal, I haven't done it because my gear is so far behind, but a lot of people are saying that this is basically the pay to win mode. And what do I mean by that? The people who have like the arch boss tier 2 weapons are apparently dominating this. Now, that might not mean anything to you, doesn't mean that much to me, but this mode I think is highlighting that there probably should be a need for some kind of like equalizing of the gear. Now, the problem with equalizing the gear in this game is that some of the actual weapons and items and stuff like that have like very strong traits that will completely mess up your build if you don't have them. So what they would maybe have to do is allow it so that you can pick your gear, which might be something that they don't do because it will be quite a lot of effort. We also don't actually know if the arena is the kind of content that will make it into the global version at launch, or is it actual content that they want to sort of delay and put at another time. We don't know. We'll find out, I guess, closer to the time. Now, I've just mentioned pay to win. There's sort of like a couple of main issues with this game that a lot of people are going to run into. One of them is the pay to win. And they've added a little bit of extra pay to win. So on the pay to win, there is a battle pass, right? You can expect this. A lot of games have battle passes. The reason it's pay to win is that some of these items are very strong. We spoke about the trait unlock stones. They're pretty important. All of these weapon growth and accessory growth and all these kind of stuff, they're pretty strong. Even the in-game gold is pretty sought after. There's a special kind of stellarite, which to be fair you can get in game, but you know, they give you this and you know, it's literally 15% weapon damage. Look, it's pay to win. It's not that bad pay to win for me, a battle pass, but if that's something you're concerned about. Obviously, this is a Korean free-to-play game. A little bit of pay to win is to be expected, but let's just show you through the battle pass and the next thing, which is what they relatively recently added, and that is Silesium's Blessing. Now, this is basically an optional sub that does a variety of different things. Now, this sub actually is about, I think it's about £6 or £7, probably about $6 or $7. The battle pass, I think, is more like 10 to 15. Don't quote me on the exact price. Obviously, it's in Korean. I haven't done the conversion. But this lasts 21 days. Don't know why it's not a full month. And there's a couple of things that it will let you have that are pay to win. Primarily, if I'm honest, it's probably the fact that you can then buy extra dimensional contract tokens, which basically means you have to spend, you buy this, then you spend gold, and then you get more loot from dungeons. It's that simple. Look, it's an optional sub. It's got a little bit of pay to win in it. You know, if this is a massive issue for you, then, you know, you're probably not going to play Throne of Liberty anyway. Obviously, the big pay to win element here is the fact that the auction house is straight up using real money. So you use Lucent. You can get in game by getting an item and then selling it yourself, but you can literally just straight up buy it. It doesn't use Solent, it uses Lucent. Everything here is available for purchase. Now, some people will be like, hey, Jay, that's just pay to progress. Like, I'm not really bothered about that. Well, yes, all of these items are going to be available in game, but the odds of you getting some of them are very, very small. For example, I think this item here, I'm not calling it good, I'm just scrolling through and I found this. This, I think, is probably around about $1,500. Don't quote me on the exact amount, but it would be an absolute shed ton of real life money if you wanted to buy this. I'm assuming that this drops from an arch boss, and the odds of you getting that is way less than 1 in 10. But let's just assume that it was 1 in 10 that you would get it. It drops once per week from the arch bosses at least. And even if it was 1 in 10, you would pay for 10 weeks worth of progress. Then keep in mind you want to add the traits to it and all that kind of jazz. Like, the game is going to be pay to win. And what's a little bit weird about Throne of Liberty is that the strength of the pay to win is going to vary over the game's lifespan. Now, while you're first gearing up, it might not be that bad, but then in the middle phase it might be, and then at the end phase maybe it won't be, or maybe that'll be reversed. I don't truly know, right? There's no way I can conceive that. I actually don't know. But the TLDR is you can buy power and you can use that power in those guild modes that will then enable you to become even stronger. So yes, you could argue it's pay to progress. The reality is it's pay to win. How bad will it be? It's almost impossible to quantify that. Personally, I think it's relatively bad, but some people don't, okay? You know, it's your call. But I think the pay to win is one thing that, you know, a lot of people are going to get hung up on. And they did make it a little bit better with these extracts and stuff like that. But, you know, ultimately, I think a lot of people are going to hit that stumbling block and be like, yikes. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about, it's not really an improvement. It's just these are basically hang-ups that I think people are going to have with the game is the combat. Now, I've been finding the combat a little bit questionable. I'm not necessarily like using all of my combos correctly or what have you. But I think a lot of people are going to look at this combat, and I didn't have my hand ready to press Q there, but they're going to look at this combat and be like, is that good enough for me to want to play it, right? And the answer is, I don't know. I personally say that the combat's not that great, but, you know, maybe you do. It does have this, like, perfect block system, although I actually didn't block, so I don't know what happened, but, you know, I think a lot of people are going to get hung up on the combat. What I would say with the combat, though, is that you probably need to try it yourself, and you probably need to try it yourself on low ping. And you're in luck. And the reason you're in luck is because there is going to be an open beta that runs for 5 days from July 18th to July 23rd, and you can see the times here on the screen. All you're going to need to do that, by the way, if you're on PC, is to go over to Steam. Eventually, there's going to be a pre-download. The pre-download is supposed to be today, but as at the time of recording this, it's not available for pre-download on Steam. But in theory, this is how you will do it. It'll run for 5 days. Try it yourself. It's going to be a free-to-play game, so even if you miss this, try it when it launches, right? It's free. Give it a bash. I'm going to be playing this pretty hardcore on Twitch from as soon as it goes live on Thursday afternoon, UK time. So if you want to come and watch me do that, if you want to come and play with me, all the better. I mean, in-game. The other thing that I think will be a concern to some people, but maybe not everybody, is that this is going to be a guild-based game. Now, thankfully, Amazon, when they're doing their marketing, they're now always talking about guilds and guild deep dives and, you know, how to get into a guild, what guilds do for you and stuff like that. You are going to want a guild if you play this game. And it doesn't matter if it's my guild or somebody else's, you're going to want to find a group. It just makes sense, right? And the reason for that is a lot of the content is guild-based PvP. Yes, there is the PvE dungeons, sure, that exists. And yes, there will eventually be raids, but a lot of the content is going to be open world, guild v guild. And the reason I do open world like this is that you're not going to like be surprised by PvP. Zones turn PvP and you don't have to be there. Like if you don't want to do PvP, you can absolutely play this game without doing PvP. But the best sort of experience will be playing this game in a guild, doing the events, doing the open world events, either doing, you know, doing the bosses, although I think at some point that might be a little bit tricky, or doing the guild events, or doing the boon stones and the wrist stones, because there's going to be a lot of those on the map. If you're in a smaller guild, you can do the small ones. If you're in a better guild, you do the better ones. And eventually, they've actually said that they might do some small-scale boonstone wrist stones. I don't know how that will work, but for smaller guilds. So you're going to probably want to play this in a guild. I think that just makes sense. So all the positives that they've done, those 3 things I think will stick around. Spat a little bit on myself then. The game I think will be called Pay to Win, and it is, right? It's just whether or not that's an acceptable amount for you. You will have to judge it. The combat is something you're probably going to want to try yourself. And then if you do play it, it's probably not really a solo game. You can play it like a solo, right? You can do the dungeons, get your tier 1s, try and work on your tier 5s and do all the traits and stuff like that. If you really want to do like dungeons, it's weird that, right? You can't really play it as a solo without grouping, right? If you are against grouping, you're not going to want to play this game, I think, because yes, you can do the MSQ. Yes, you can go and do the Dominion fights, which technically aren't grouping, even though you're joining a faction, but really the best PvE content is going to be these dungeons, and I'm led to believe that the tier 1s not that hard, but the tier 2s are pretty difficult. So if you're a PvEer who sort of wants to play more solo but not necessarily solo, then this is your content. For the rest of you, you'll be doing guild v guild PvP. If that's a problem for you, then Throne of Liberty is not going to be for you. But they've made lots of changes, and honestly, I think it's a much better experience. Whether or not the game's for me, you know when I'm going to decide that? I'm actually going to decide that this Thursday, and for those 5 days. I'm going to play the game relatively hard on Twitch, And if I like the game, I'll stick with the game till launch. And if I don't, you know what, I'll just move on at that point. I think one of the biggest issues with Throne of Liberty will be its reputation. We've sort of seen that lately with some dialogue around the game. Some people thinking the game still is incredibly Zergy, but a lot of that's actually been taken away. You know, there's going to be good criticism and bad criticism. That doesn't mean you should play it or you shouldn't play it. It's up to you. It's free to play. I'd give it a try if I was you. Is it going to be my next major MMO that I play for years and years? Almost assuredly not. Can I get some out of it with that new MMO feeling? Yeah, I hope so. We'll see though. We'll see. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Is this a game you're going to be trying or are you going to skip it? What are your thoughts so far? For now, like and subscribe. Join the guild in the Discord, etc. Do whatever you want to do. Come follow me on Twitch. For now, have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.